Hoops Heaven proudly brings to you Basketball Hustle, featuring your hosts, the writer, Chris Pike, and the scoring machine, Shawn Redhage. Now it's time for another episode of Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle. That's right, it looks like we're onto a regular thing now, Shawn, so we must be doing something right. I'm Chris Pike, your co-host, but let's get straight into it because plenty to talk about coming out of round 4 of the NBL and now looking ahead to round 5 that is getting underway shortly. Shawn Redhage, my co-host, thanks for coming back for another show.
Thanks, Pikey. I'm looking forward to it. Let's get into it.
Like I said, plenty to talk about. What stood out to you from round 4 across the league? The Kings are still unbeaten. The Wildcats had a pretty impressive doubleheader win. Melbourne United lost another game, even though they did get on the board. Plenty happening at the Illawarra Hawks. The Sydney Kings have announced a replacement for Kevin Lish in the short term, which we'll get to. The Perth Wildcats have got their new assistant coach on board. We'll touch on all of that as we go along with the show. But what stood out to you coming out of round 4?
Well, I just think you're starting to see the top teams and kind of the middle of the pack teams start to separate a little bit more. Obviously, the Kings undefeated, Wildcats going pretty strong at 5-1, and then you've got a lot of teams. Southeast Melbourne, although the loss to the Wildcats, still sitting 4-1, and then the rest of the pack there it's going to be interesting next few weeks. You're starting to see some teams make some moves. Obviously, there's been some injuries and that type of thing. So I think these next few weeks are going to separate the pretenders from the contenders, and we're going to see a lot of teams, I guess, just fighting to stay in contention.
Yeah, absolutely. Big show as well here on Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle this week as well, Shawn. 3 big guests. You caught up with one of them for the fourth quarter on Friday night at RAC Arena. Mitch Creek, fantastic to speak to a guy that has been to the World Cup, played in the NBA, and you had a terrific chat with him. And also Mitch Norton from the Perth Wildcats, point guard, obviously started at the Townsville Crocs, then the Illawarra Hawks, plays his 200th NBL game. It's amazing to consider. He's only 26 years of age and he's already racked up 200 games. And then an old coach of yours, Sean Dennis, now coaching in Japan, in his 3rd season coaching in Japan. His last season in the NBL, he was the coach of the year at the Townsville Crocs. With those 3 big-name guests, Shawn, what stands out to you?
Oh, look, I think it's a huge show, and I think we're pretty privileged to be able to get so many big names onto our show so early. So, I think you're right there with Mitch Norton, 200 games and sitting at only 26. It's pretty impressive. 1 shows his talent. 2 shows the respect that the coaches, even a captain at such a young age up there in Townsville. And then obviously his skill level is right up there. So he's been fantastic for this league, and he's got a lot more years to go. So it's kind of scary how many games he could be playing by the end of his career.
Yeah, I spoke to him about it later on. I reckon he could easily have 10 more years left in him. He looked up to Peter Crawford up in Townsville in his early days. He could easily rack up 450 plus games.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. And the way he plays as well, he's durable. He plays strong, and you just kind of feel like he's going to be a valuable piece to this Wildcat team in the near future for sure.
Now, thanks to Hoops Heaven for allowing us to be here again, Shawn. Let's get into some of the news. There's plenty to talk about. The latest breaking news: the Sydney Kings, Kevin Lish obviously out for a couple of months with his fractured ankle. Deshon Taylor, the man who, while they were over in Utah, the Adelaide 36ers cut to bring in Jerome Randall, he's now the man to replace the Kings, and let's hope, at least for the sake of drama, that he's right to play on Saturday night back in Adelaide, because that would be fascinating.
Yeah, that would be. It seems to always work out that way. Whenever you get cut by a team, all of a sudden you're playing against them pretty quickly. If you do get a chance back in the league, so great for Deshon Taylor. Kind of get a chance to really show what he's made of. If you're everyone else in the league, you're thinking the Sydney Kings, how much more talent do they need? I mean, they're already sitting undefeated, dominating, especially defensively. But I think one thing that Deshon Taylor can bring is his shooting, outside shooting, especially with the attention that Andrew Bogut's going to receive in the middle.
Absolutely. The Perth Wildcats have also signed their new assistant coach to replace Paul Woolpert. I was was probably expecting somebody closer to home and maybe somebody in the SBL and maybe somebody like a Matt Parsons or a Nick Lakovic or a Ben Ettridge or a Ryan Petrick or somebody along those terms, or a Stephen Black. But they've gone right to the top. Scott Roth has had his resume probably is one that we don't have time to go through on this show. If you want to check out his background, 20 plus years working all around the world as a coach. He was a former NBA player. That's a hell of a signing for the Wildcats.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting move from the Wildcats. Obviously, there would be a number of coaches here at home that would be putting their hand up. I think Trevor kind of wants to go with someone probably with a little bit more international experience, and just reading the resume is pretty impressive. So, it's always tough to add an assistant coach in mid-season, especially one that's probably not familiar with the league or with the organization or with the personnel of the team. So he'll have to get up to scratch, but I'm sure the Wildcats will have the, structure in place to kind of get him fitting pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at some of the matches from round 4 before we move on to our guest today, Shawn. Thanks to Hoop7 once again for allowing us to be here. Check them out at hoop7.com.au. All started back on Thursday. 1.9 million people across the world were watching this game. Shawn, at Spark Arena. It was an amazing atmosphere in Auckland as well. Not a great game. The Breakers beat the Hawks 103-72, but for that many eyeballs to be on the NBL, it can only be a good thing, but important for the Breakers to get a win, and the Hawks obviously continue to struggle, and we'll get to their game on Sunday where their struggles got even worse.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Both teams were desperate for a win. New Zealand Breakers, obviously being at home, really helped them here. And Spark Arena, it's great to see on a Thursday night to see the crowd filling up that stadium, and then obviously back in the U.S., so many people watching the game. It's exciting. When we talk about it every week, but it's pretty impressive. I think about when I came back into the league, they might have 10 people in the U.S. trying to watch an NBL game. And that was pretty much family of the players, maybe the import players. And now you've got over almost 2 million people. It's exciting times, and I think it's just shown the strength of the league. And, I thought that, it wasn't the best game, but I did think it showed the talents of RJ Hampton and LaMelo Ball, and it's great for them to get some exposure and some court time out there and playing at such a high level.
It was an unbelievable way to start the game too, with that huge block from RJ on LaMelo, when it looked like LaMelo was going to throw it down, and RJ just came from nowhere to deliver that block. That was the perfect way to start the game, and both of the 18-year-olds put on a pretty good show as the game went on, I thought. Friday night, big doubleheader. Started in Adelaide, pretty tight game. 36ers 101-97 win over the Taipans. Two teams that look like right now they're going to be sort of around the mark to be fighting for that fourth spot come the end of the season.
Adelaide had a tough start to the year against Sydney, obviously coming back from the USA. There were some question marks how they were going to compete, but just knowing Joey Wright, he was going to have his team ready to play. And, they almost gave this game away. They were up big late in the fourth quarter. Cairns hit some big shots to get them back in it, but they, Daniel Johnson steadied the ship, and Adelaide did what they needed to do at home. They got the win, and, I'm just excited about Adelaide and especially their new venue. I hope they keep winning and just can build similar to what the Perth Wildcats did here in Perth, and just that new arena, being in the city and able to, just attract a whole nother level of fans to build some momentum for this NBL as well. So great start to at home, especially for Adelaide this season.
Then second game Friday night, you were there courtside for the TV coverage, Shawn, and you're not an NBL club unless you've copped a hiding in Perth, and the Phoenix might as well have got it out of the way. First up, 110-79 win for the Wildcats. Jericho White and Bryce Cotton, they went for 8 from 11 combined from three-point range. Nick Kay was terrific. Damian Martin gave John Robertson a lesson as well, who came to Perth in amazing form. Just one of those nights to write off for Southeast Melbourne, but that happens to everybody in Perth at some stage.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, obviously, I think the Wildcats were a bit frustrated with their loss the week before at home to Cairns, and almost a little bit embarrassed losing by 23. So they had a point to prove. Southeast Melbourne, Phoenix, probably the wrong time to visit Perth. But you got to give the Wildcats credit, especially defensively. I was curious to see how Roberson would go against Damian Martin. And, I thought the game plan from the Wildcats was terrific, and that they just basically denied Roberson the ball all all over the court, made someone else beat them, and they weren't able to. I listening to their coach in the huddles, it just sounded like, they wanted to come out here and test themselves, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix against the Wildcats, but they obviously learned a lot in that. And, it should hold them up well later in the year if they do have to face the Wildcats, maybe come finals time or something like that. But it was, impressive performance from the Wildcats.
Then on Saturday, Melbourne United finally got their elusive first win of the season. But they had to do it the hard way against the Breakers. They won 104-98. Sean Long and Mello Trimble led the way. Chris Goulding, another 24 points, but they had to fight pretty hard for it.
Yeah, I thought New Zealand played well, especially in the first half. They were a little bit in control. Melbourne, I think in the end, they're probably just talent there. Sean Long played outstanding. I think Mello Trimble was pretty good in the second half, and it was a good performance by Melbourne. I didn't think it was outstanding. I think they definitely do need to improve defensively, but always good to get a win, and especially playing against the Breakers, who were playing their second game of the round as well.
Then Sydney Kings, they remain undefeated, 94-79 win against the Bullets, and it was probably a game that really wasn't in any jeopardy for most of it. A really solid performance at both ends of the floor from the Kings, even though Andrew Bogut copped his second unsportsmanlike foul, I think, with 8 minutes to go in the game.
Yeah, and I love the comments by Bogut afterwards saying, he was on minutes restriction anyway. So, great job by the men in green to provide that little bit extra rest for the tired legs of his after a huge offseason with the Boomers. So little bit of tongue-in-cheek there by Andrew Bogut. But, Sydney just getting it done defensively, and no one's really even challenged them that much so far this season. I'm a little bit concerned with Brisbane. Yeah. They haven't obviously had a good start to the season, but they're going to have to try and find some form and get the personnel right as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a change down the stretch.
Well, there's a lot of talk about it. Do you feel like they need a different type of import? I mean, a lot of people seem to think that Braun and Singler may be too similar of a player. Do they need somebody that gives them a bit of a different look to what they've got at the moment?
Yeah, I do. I do think they need like a four-man that can, be a little bit stronger down there in the post, give them a little bit of a post presence, and just be kind of do all that grunt work that you kind of need someone to be able to do. Maybe free up their scores and their shooters as well. So I expect them that they will make a change, because if they're going to have to compete with Sydney and Perth, I think they need someone, especially in that 4 spot, that can I guess compete with a Nick Kay and Deshon Taylor and those guys Sydney and Perth have.
How soon do you have to make a move like that? When does it start to become too late?
Well, I think if you think that it's not the right fit, you got to make it sooner rather than later.
Yep.
And you think Lamanis would know at this stage. You've seen those guys for at least a month or two to know if they're going to be the right fit. And Andre Lamanis has won championships in this league, so he knows what's needed and required. Obviously, you've got Mika Bakona there that can provide some of that grunt work. I'm not sure if he's 100%, but
he's not playing many minutes at the moment.
No, he's not playing many minutes. So I'll be interested to see. I expect them to make a change, and that's where having that third import. You can have a little gamble early in the season, but then you need to probably go out and find someone if you're sure that it's not the right fit for you.
Then on Sunday, really good performance by Southeast Melbourne to bounce back. It's not easy to lose by 30 and then 2 days later, and probably only 36 hours later, given the time difference, and it was a reasonably early start on Sunday, to then beat the Adelaide 36ers. Mitch Creek up against his old team. He bounced back and had a better performance. Adam Gibson was probably the difference, especially at a point there where he just couldn't miss to get the Phoenix back into the game after Adelaide was, I think, up by 13 during the second quarter. And John Robertson was back in form, hitting 6 3-pointers as well, and they got the job done against Adelaide and Daniel Johnson, who was playing his 300th NBL game.
Yeah, it was a good performance. Robertson was outstanding again from the 3-point line. Outside of that Perth game, he's been a dynamite from distance. So it's Southeast Melbourne. They got 9 of their first 10 games either at home or in Melbourne. Yep. So it's a pretty dream start for a new club to play so many games at home. So they're going to have to get some wins on the board, I think, early on, and they're doing it. So credit to them, and a good job of bouncing back.
Then the second game on Sunday, the game that was given our tips last week, it got the biggest reaction from our audience so far when some of the Red Army fans didn't like you tipping against the Wildcats, Shawn, but the Hawks put in a pretty good performance. The Wildcats did end up winning 81-76, but you suggest if Josh Boone played and if Aaron Brooks didn't go down with his now what could be a career-ending Achilles injury, then the result could have been different because outside of Bryce Cotton, Nick Kay and Tariko White, the Wildcats didn't probably have their best afternoon.
Yeah, I just know personally that trip is tough to Illawarra, especially playing on a Friday at home, going to Sunday. And I knew Illawarra. I mean, the difference of talent in this league isn't that big. I mean, Illawarra is sitting bottom of the ladder, is not that much less talented than the Perth Wildcats. They just probably haven't figured out the cohesion. But I knew that if they were going to come out motivated, and probably, you're right. If the ball was in Aaron Brooks' hands at the end of the game, I feel like they probably would have had a lot better shot to win that one. Some questionable decisions from LaMelo in shot selection, and it's something that he's going to have to grow into. I thought Illawarra played well, especially in the first quarter, putting up over 30 points against the Wildcats and then finished at 76 for the game. So they just got to find that consistency over 4 quarters. But, as the Wildcats tend to do, they found a way to win, and Bryce Cotton and Tariko White made some big plays down the stretch.
Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see Aaron Brooks again because he had the ability to be the leading scorer in this league, and it would have been exciting to watch him for this whole season. And I guess there's now conjecture over whether or not Josh Boone is going to stick around in Illawarra for the rest of the season either. They obviously need to replace Brooks. They may end up replacing Boone. What would you be doing if you were the Hawks right now?
Yeah, it is a tough one. You've got to go and get the best player. I think you need someone like a Brooks that you can trust to put the ball in the hands, especially late in the game, that's got experience, that can kind of be that, I guess, calming factor out there on the court for the team to be able to get the wins. I think LaMelo Ball's putting up some incredible numbers for an 18-year-old. They just got to find that closer that can really get the job done down the stretch. And, you look at a Tim Conrad, at the start of the game, he was on fire against the Wildcats. And then he hardly touched the ball that much. I mean, he got a few buckets down, I guess, late in the fourth quarter, but nothing like they were going to go run some 3-pointers and get some shots for him. And that's where I just think some experience from that will help, especially when you got a guy that can really catch fire like Conrad can at times. So it's, trying to go get a veteran point guard leader that can really kind of settle the ship. And then, I think Ogilvy's playing some pretty good basketball. Maybe get a 4-5 guy that can really, play more of that 4 spot. Kind of like a Nick Kay that's kind of versatile and can shoot the 3 but play down low as well.
Maybe Brian Conklin would be a good fit to come back. He fits that description pretty perfectly.
Yeah, no, I mean, he knows the system. He knows the league. I'm not sure if he's playing anywhere at the moment.
I think he's in Europe somewhere,
I'm sure. Yeah. So it's going to be hard. And that's the tough part at this point. You've got a lot of guys who are already signed over in Europe. Maybe they wanted to come to the NBL, but they've signed over in Europe, so they've already got jobs. So it's a tough one to find a quality player. And even used to be able to go to the G League and find players. But now with the fact that these guys can get pulled up to the NBA from the G League, it makes it more enticing. And there's a big buyout as well with the G League as well. I think it's like $30,000 or something. Don't quote me exactly on the number, but it's not anything cheap.
Well, not something that a club like the Hawks would be able to do at this point, especially given where they are in the season, where you think that playoffs are probably out of reach already.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I wouldn't say playoffs are out of reach, but they got to go on a run, and they got to go on a run pretty quickly. So it is a tough one when you got injuries to guys so important to your success like they have this early part of the season.
Last game of the round, up in Cairns, their first home game since the second night of the season. So they'd been on the road for a long time. They did a good job to beat Melbourne United 90-85. Nate Jarwai gave some terrific minutes. Cam Oliver probably didn't shoot the ball in the first half as well as he has been, but ended up putting up another strong double-double. And Scott Machado probably had the better of his point guard battle with Mello Trimble, even though Trimble still had 21 points, and even though Shawn Long had 21 and 17 for Melbourne, they couldn't get the job done, and they slipped to 1-4. It's a long road back from there.
It is. It's a tough start, and it's just like you look at the box score after Melbourne United's games, and you think Shawn Long, 21 and 17, Mello Trimble, 21 points,
yep.
And you're just like, how are they losing when these superstars are putting up huge numbers? But it just seems like it's not clicking yet. They haven't figured out a way to get Mello and Golding and Shawn Long all going at the same time, and then Barlow usually chips in and can provide some offense, and then Mitch McCarron as well. So, is Casey Prather going to be able to bring that for him? Possibly. We know, he's had a lot of success in this league and is a proven winner. So we'll see. How long is he out for as well? It seems like we haven't heard a lot of updates about where he's at and when he's due to return. So, but I know for Melbourne United fans, they're going to want him back on the court ASAP, try and steady this ship because, 1-4, they're going to have to, they have the talent. It's just a matter of, and I suspect Dean Bickerman will get them, even the year they won it, they started 5-5 and then rallied off. So maybe this is just that those growing pains are going through early in the season, but they're going to have to get some runs on the board quickly.
Just touching on Prather, in hindsight, if you knew that he was going to be out for at least the first 5 rounds, would have you replaced him with somebody short term? And when he comes back, how long will it take him to be able to get back to his best and to also fit into the system to make sure that there's no growing pains? Because when you're 1-4, you don't have much room for error.
Yeah, you don't, and I suspect that they didn't know he was going to be out this long. And looking at their roster, to be able to bring in a guy like Mitch McCarron, that would probably be on the bench to start the year, is a pretty good replacement for him. But they've just got it just makes their bench a pretty short bench as well as far as production there. So it'll be interesting. It'll probably have to, if they need to make a replacement, they'll probably need to do that pretty soon for Prather, depending on how much longer until he comes back.
Thanks for that wrap around 4 to Hoops Heaven, and thanks, Shawn, for all of your insight. We'll now head into our interviews. Just in a few words on each, what are you looking forward to hearing from Mitch Norton first of all, then Shawn Dennis, a former assistant coach of yours, and you had a chat with Mitch Creek as well in the fourth quarter. What can we look forward to from that?
Yeah, Mitch Norton, obviously, he's got a lot of experience for being so young, and being in Townsville, Illawarra, coming over to Perth. It'll be interesting to see just his take on those different environments and I guess where he's at in his stage of his basketball as well, and some of the goals he's looking forward to in the future. Shawn Dennis obviously done some outstanding work here in the NBL, was coach of the year. I thought he was incredible up there in Townsville with limited resources to be able to produce what he did up there, and probably one of those guys that I think will get a chance back in the NBL if that's something that he wants in the future. And I guess just interested to see his experience over in Japan and Mitch Creek. We talk about his NBA experience last year and some of the things he learned from that. So I think there's a lot to look forward to the rest of the episode.
Before we get to Mitch Norton in our first interview of this week's Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle. As you can tell by our name, we wouldn't be here without the support of Hoops Heaven. They've been there since the start of this podcast, Shawn, and they've been around themselves since 2012. You can check out their store, Murray Street in the Perth City if you're in Perth, but hoopsheaven.com.au, all of the basketball gear you could ever hope for, jerseys, tracksuits, pants, shorts, shoes, everything you could ever dream of. Check them out also for all of their latest deals, some terrific bargains throughout the last week. Hoops Heaven on Facebook, Hoops Heaven AU on Instagram, everything from Nike, Jordan, Adidas, the latest Mitchell and Ness gear, new era, all the latest sporting basketball gear and balls that you can hope for, first ever NBL gear. Some of the things that stood out to me this week, Shawn, a hoodie sale. If you want to get a hoodie of your latest and dearest NBA team, $50 for a terrific hoodie. Some shoes that really stood out too. If you need some kicks right now, there's some Nike LeBron Witness 4 shoes, size 7 to 15. You can't help but not be impressed by those. There's a Nike Kyrie Flytrap 2 pair of shoes, which are a standout. If you're an Adidas fan, there's the Dame 5 Collegiate Purple shoes, which you would find hard to say no to. The ones that stood out to me, the T-Mac Millennium Toronto Raptors shoes. I'm going to find it very tough to avoid buying those, even though I'm not a Raptors fan, but they stood out to me. So, Hoops Heaven, you can check them out in Perth City yourself. Order online at hoopsheaven.com.au. Mention Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle, and Jason and his team will do you a terrific deal. And Hoops Heaven, thanks again for all your support. Now, first guest on Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle for episode 5, Mitch Norton, Perth Wildcats championship winning point guard, former Townsville Crocodiles captain, youngest ever captain of the Crocs. He grew up supporting the Crocs, grew up dreaming of playing for the Crocs. He achieved that dream and did it for more than 100 games before. Well, he had his club snatched away from him when they ceased to exist after that 2015-16 season. It didn't deter him. He landed at the Illawarra Hawks, had 2 terrific seasons, and now he's in his second season at the Perth Wildcats. He's freshly shaven, which has caused a lot of interest across the league over the past couple of weeks as well. But ahead of his 200th game in the NBL this Friday night against the Brisbane Bullets, as the Wildcats hit the road, I was able to catch up with Mitch, and let's hope you enjoy the chat that followed. Mitch Norton, thanks very much for joining us here on Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle. Unfortunately, you don't quite get to talk to Shawn Redhage on our show this week. Obviously, he's our co-host here. You didn't quite get to play with Shawn. What are your memories of those battles against him? Probably especially when you're in those early Townsville days, and obviously those couple of years at the Hawks too.
Yeah, obviously, great competitor. He was hungry to win, and I think that, showed with the results that he got over his career. And, you just knew every time you crossed that white line against Shawn, it was going to be a real battle, that's for sure. So, it was pretty cool to play against him for a number of years.
Now let's move on to you. Big week for you. 200 games in the NBL. I remember speaking to you for your 100th game when you were up in Townsville, and obviously it's a different world now that you're moved on to Perth, and unfortunately the Crocs are no longer in existence. A lot's changed in these last 100 games. You're now a championship winner. You're a gold medal winner from the Commonwealth Games. Can you reflect on what's changed in your life and I guess in terms of the NBL over these games 100 to 200?
Yeah, obviously, the hometown team, growing up supporting the Crocs and things like that, to then play 100 games, and that 100th game was actually a pretty special one. We were in Melbourne and we were down a lot of troops. We brought Harry Bowen on the road. And it was the first game I captained the club too, so it was a pretty memorable one, and we got the win on the road, which was also pretty special. But obviously the next 100 there's been a lot of changes. For me personally, obviously a few different clubs, which I'd like to hopefully hang around here for a while. So I don't like to chop and change clubs. Obviously, one of them were. It had to be done with the Crocs folding and things like that. But I think, obviously, the championship was very, very special, and that's what you play the game for, is to, have that feeling, that winning feeling with 10 of your best mates. So that was probably one of the biggest highlights of the last 100. But as far as the league, I think it's grown so much. Obviously, an extra team now, but just as far as the fan base and the access to watch games and things like that now, I think Larry's done a tremendous job.
Just going back to that, I guess that whole season, that last season at the Crocs, it was a fascinating one in a lot of ways, and I was involved in the club in a small way as well, so I got to probably experience it, pretty closely, and working with SD, who we've actually spoken to this week on the show as well, which was fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, you became the captain in probably not the circumstances you like, but to captain the club that you grew up always dreaming of playing for must have been a huge honour. But it was just such a rollercoaster ride, because it looked like a fun team to be part of, but then it was ripped away from you at the end of the season.
Yeah, exactly. We had a pretty young core. Although we were young, we also had some experience at times as well. So that was a bit of a mixed. Everyone was like, "Oh, this team's so young," but we had a number of games under our belt, so we didn't really hold that as an excuse for any results or anything like that. So it was a great group to be a part of. We all wanted the same goal, and we probably thought the championship was probably a little bit out of reach at that stage. But we really thought that we were building towards something pretty special, and I think if we had held that group together for a while, I think the results definitely would have shown.
Yeah, absolutely. Initially, the move to Illawarra, it's probably the most similar city in the league, compared to Townsville, and similar setup in terms of a small town, small club environment. How did you find your 2 years at the Hawks?
Yeah, obviously, a big change as far as lifestyle. There's waves that you can actually. Well, there's actually waves. We don't get them in Townsville, but it was a pretty cool environment to be in. Obviously, our first year we were pretty successful and made it to the grand final against Perth. So but I think it's a different coach. Although SD had spent a lot of time with Bevo, I think just the whole really let you go out and play kind of helped me in a way that I was able to kind of grow my game and help me out to learn a lot of things along the way as well. So really grateful to obviously be coached by Bevo, and that whole freedom side of things I think really helped me as far as things I need to work on and things that I'm comfortable with in my game at the moment. So it was a pretty big change, but at the same time I'm guessing it was really a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. What has it been like now to come to Perth, where I guess when you're at the Crocs and you're at the Hawks, you're not blessed for resources, and you probably have to do a lot of things as a playing group for yourselves that you now don't have to do at the Wildcats. How different is it to be a player at a big club like the Wildcats compared to what you had been used to, I guess, for your first 150 or so games?
Yeah, I think the access to coaching staff, on days off and things like that, able to go in and rebound for you and stuff like that. And obviously at the smaller clubs, you don't have as many, coaching staff willing to cut up tape and things like that. So I know in Townsville and Wollongong, obviously, they would love to get out of the office and come help rebound, but, we obviously had to cut tape and things like that. And I think, the coaches were working extremely hard to do that stuff, and really, as a coach, you want to be out on the floor with your guys and things like that, but just some circumstances just kind of didn't allow that. So I think that's probably been the biggest difference from off the top of my head, and just being in an environment where everyone is continually trying to get better, I think is pretty special as well.
What about going back to the grand final series last season? How were you always confident you would be able to make it back from that injury, and how proud were you that you not only made it back, but you ended up making a pretty significant impact on the team winning the championship in the end?
I always, when I first did the injury, I was a little bit concerned. And I'm a very goal-orientated guy, so I like to have plans in place and things like that. And I think the support staff did a really good job with helping me to understand, week by week where I need to be at to get back for not only the grand final, but the semi-final as well. So, we had a bit of a checklist, and, once I tick one thing off, I knew I could go on to the next step, and I think that really helped me to stay focused and motivated on my rehab and things like that to get back and play in the playoffs. And I think if the Brisbane game had to go on to game 3, I was a pretty good shot at playing that one. But obviously game 3 didn't come around, and the guys did a great job of buying me an extra couple of days. So and then to come in the grand final, I think the injury, obviously was pretty painful to sit there and watch those last couple of games of the season and the playoffs and stuff like that. But it really just allowed me just to sit down and watch a lot of tape on us and other teams as well. And I think that kind of helped me in that final series.
What about the start of this season? You'd have to be happy with the way you're going, both as a team and personally. I think if you ask any opposition guards around the league, they hate playing the Wildcats because they don't like being guarded by both Damien Martin and then when he's not on the floor by you. I guess that's a great compliment to you, but you're doing well the offensive end as well. You'd have to be happy with the way you've started this season.
Yeah, I think offensively, there's been a couple of games where I probably haven't been as aggressive straight off the bat, and I know Trev and my teammates as well kind of really encourage that. So it's always good when you have a team that, wants you to be aggressive on the offensive end. They know what you're going to bring defensively every night. So, yeah, to have that, encouragement from the guys is great. And obviously, shooting the ball at the moment, obviously everyone would like to shoot the ball a bit better at times, but I know the work that I'm putting in off the court, so I'm comfortable with my shots at the moment, and I know there's going to be a game this year where it's all going to turn around, and I think when that does, I think I'll be a little bit tougher to guard on the offensive end, and obviously defensively it's pretty cool to be a part of the little duo that we got going here with Damo. Back in the day, I remember playing against, Brad Robbins and Damo, and that was always a scary sight. So that's something that we kind of, wanted to replicate.
The thing you've always been so good at from game one right through now to game 200 is when you attack the basket, you can finish from some incredible positions. It looks like you're horribly out of position. It looks like you're chucking up a bad shot, but you just find a way to get the ball in the hole if you're chucking up close to the basket. Is that something that... Is it something that's luck? Is it something you've always been good at? Is it something you work on? What do you put that down to?
I think it's something that come over time. Obviously, when in my younger days, I was a lot quicker than a lot of the other guards and teams. So that's kind of where I earned all my points. Were in the paint, going up against some taller guys and things like that. But once you figure out how to learn. How to use your body at certain angles and things like that. Playing off 2 feet, 1 foot. It's all about kind of reading angles and where the defense is and how to put your body in position to get off that shot. Because obviously, I'm blessed with a lot of height, so I got to use my strength.
Now the beard, it caused a huge amount of interest when you shaved your beard off. Do you plan on keeping it off, or is it coming back?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I put a post up on social media and there was like 156 people voted for the beard, 155 people voted for no beard. Wow. So it can't get any closer than that. So it just depends how lazy I guess. So with these couple of road trips coming up, I might try to keep it short. Who knows?
Just finally, before we let you go, really appreciate you joining us. Becoming a 200-game player in the NBL, when I'm sure you still feel like you're pretty young, and you are pretty young in a lot of ways. You could easily have 10 years left in the league, which is remarkable to think of. What does becoming a 200-game player mean to you?
Yeah, it's obviously, it's pretty special. I've got goosebumps thinking about it right now. To be 26 and rack up 200 games, as a professional in any sport is a great achievement. And, I just think it's, a bit of a reward for, all the hard work that I've put in. And obviously I've got a lot of coaches and strength staff and all that stuff I need to thank as well. But, probably don't have time today. But, it means a hell of a lot. And I remember, my first couple of games, PC was getting 250 games awards and stuff like that, and I was like, man, that's incredible to play that many games and things like that. So it's very special. And I just hope we can go out and get a win on Friday night.
Absolutely. We could keep chatting forever, Mitch, but I better let you go because you do need to get over to Brisbane for that, so you can play that 200th game. But I've always followed your career closely, as you know, and it's always been a pleasure to chat to you and to just share your journey a little bit. So best of luck for the 200th game and for plenty more after that.
Lovely. Thank you very much, mate.
Let's keep things moving here on Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle. And our next guest, the flashback interview of the week, thanks to ID Athletic, is Shawn Dennis, a man that anyone involved in Australian basketball in some way would be familiar with over the last 30 years. It started with a 197-game career, split between the Newcastle Falcons and the Hobart Devils, and then he moved straight into coaching. Started while he was still playing at the Newcastle Falcons. He ended up head coaching at the Falcons between 1997 and 1999 before which would become a similar story over the next 10 years. His club was taken away from him, but had a couple of years assistant coaching at the Wollongong Hawks. And then he found himself over in New Zealand and had a terrific stint with the Hawke's Bay Hawks for 7 seasons, ended up coaching the New Zealand women's team for a couple of years, and he really built his coaching legacy over in New Zealand. But there was a pull to come back to Australia, and he ended up firstly with a stint again with Rob Beveridge at the West Sydney Razorbacks and the Sydney Spirit. And then a couple of years later, he joined Bevo over in Perth at the Perth Wildcats, which is where he would remain until he was appointed head coach of the Townsville Crocodiles, and didn't have the resources to work with. And it was tough going in the first couple of years, but anyone that was around that 2015-16 Crocs team, they just played with a lot of heart. You have a look at the guys that have gone on to bigger things since, and that includes Mitch Norton, Nick Kay, Clint Steindl, even Harry Froling, Mirko Jeric, who's now back in the league as well with the Taipans, and Shawn Dennis was Coach of the Year that year. It's not often that you could be the NBL Coach of the Year and then that ends up being your last season coaching, but unfortunately he had no team to coach at the end of that season despite having re-signed with the Crocs. And since then, life has taken him and his wife Lani to Japan, and now he's in his 3rd season coaching the Shiga Lake Stars. And gee, it's a fascinating chat anytime you get to sit down with SD and to talk basketball, to talk life, to talk the ups and downs of it all. I just could have spoken to him for hours, but obviously we don't quite have the length on this show to do that. But let's hope you enjoyed the chat that I did have with him starting now. Back here on Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle, and very happy to have this man as a guest. I've known him for, more than 10 years now, from when he first arrived at Perth, and never have I probably respected a man more in basketball for just calling it the way it is. There's no bullshit about this man, but he's a fantastic basketball brain. But more than that, he's a terrific person. He can be hard as nails in terms of his basketball, but he's tactically as switched on as anybody. A great players coach as well, if you ask anybody who's played under him, but also get him away from basketball and you wouldn't find a better man. So Shawn Dennis, all the way from Japan, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Pike. You've made me sound like a superstar there. I'm not sure how true all that is, but I appreciate your kind words.
No, wouldn't say it if it's not true, SD. Like I said, you're coming to us from Japan, a long way from where a lot of your career's been involved in the NBL. Obviously, it's remarkable to think that you were NBL Coach of the Year only 3 and a bit years ago in Townsville, and all of a sudden you didn't have a team to coach. But it seems like you've landed on your feet. How's life in Japan treating you?
Yeah, it's good. You know, it has completely different challenges than coaching in Australia, and it takes a bit of adjusting and getting used to. Obviously, the number one thing that you face is constantly the language barrier and trying to get your message across, and coming up with ways to be able to communicate. And I think it's actually made me a better coach and a calmer coach. You know, I think people would be surprised watching me on the sidelines now compared to what I call passionate, some call anger on the sidelines when I was with Townsville. But Lani and I are loving it here, and we're really settling into the lifestyle, and there's a lot to love about living in Japan. And as I said, the biggest one I've loved is the challenges that coaching throws you, and the personal growth that I've had has been a lot of fun. Just
in terms of coaching, you're in your 3rd season now coaching the Shiga Lake Stars. We talked about it before we started recording, and it's a 60-game season you're playing. It's almost an NBA schedule. You're 10 games into the season so far. 3rd season at the club. How are things going so far?
It's quite ironic that it's very similar to when I went to Townsville. The club is not one of the bigger clubs from a monetary point of view, and that's one thing in Japan. The gulf between the haves and the have-nots is absolutely huge. The top 10 here is probably spending 3 to 4 times the amount we spend. So we've tried to build it like we did in Japan, but the danger in doing that is also we're based on the English Premier League, so there's a relegation and promotion from 1st division to 2nd division, so you've got to be careful while you're trying to build that you don't end up in that bottom 4. And we feel we've put together our best roster, and it's just like in the 3rd year of Townsville, a good mix of young players and some veterans, and they're learning to play together, and it's a lot of fun coming to practice when we can practice, because as you said, it's 60 games, and we've just played 10 games in October and had a stretch where we played 8 games in 17 days.
Yeah.
So
it's very difficult to practice too much, and but it's fun working with this group and watching some of these younger players starting to grow, and that's why I say it just reminds me of what we were starting to achieve in Townsville before it unfortunately had to close its doors. And I've always felt coming here that that's what we'd have to do, because again, you can't just go out and we can't do what Perth did, just go and get a Nick Kay who's ready to be the player he is now. So we've got to try and build that and then try and retain it, and we've got some really good young kids coming on well.
Talk about what it's like living in Japan. What's the challenges coaching wise? Obviously the language is one thing, and I assume you've got an interpreter who's very close by your side, but what's the different challenges coaching in Japan, where you've not only got the language barrier, but there's a culture difference as well that's natural compared to when you're coaching in your home country?
It is really different. One thing, with the local players, you've got to really approach a different way in how you evaluate them. Most of them don't take being yelled at very well, or being I guess almost put in front of pointed out in situations where they've made a mistake in front of the whole group. They struggle with that side of it, so you've got to come up with different ways to evaluate and critically evaluate the players. They because they can't understand me if I get too, I call it passionate. I get too passionate in the way I converse with people. They take it that I'm angry, and that's really difficult here with the referees. And I think a lot of people in Australia would be amazed at, who know me and know what I'm like on the sidelines at times, would be amazed at how much calmer I am now on the sidelines. So that's just been great growth for me to become a calmer coach, because the referees, they don't understand me. So, I got 2 tech fouls last year for cheering for my team because the referee thought I was talking to them because he didn't understand me. And then when he explained it through the interpreter, it's like, and twice they said sorry. I'm like, yeah, that's great. It just cost me 10,000 yen fine for something I didn't do. So you go, that's a big one. And the players are really different. As I said, they're very scared to make mistakes, and so you've got to try and encourage them to. It's okay to try things. It doesn't. If there's positive mistakes, and mistakes not a mistake if you learn, and that was always our philosophy in Townsville. It's what I'm trying to teach the team here. It's okay to try things. Don't hang your head, and that's really difficult for some of them, because if they miss a couple of shots, they'll just shut up shop. They'll stop shooting. And you've got to try and encourage them. I've got a great shooter here who's, every game he comes off with scratches on his body, and it took me a long time to get him to realise it's okay if you miss shots, you've got to keep shooting. You're too good a shooter. And it's been a real challenge. And, the players are different in that, most of the Americans in this league are big. There's very little size in the Japanese players. And so some of the way you construct your defenses, you have to be careful, because you can end up with a 5'9" or 5'10", 175 to 180 centimetre guy on a centre on a rotation, and you just get killed on it. So all those sorts of things come into what you do.
Paulie Hanari's recently made the move to Japan as well, having stepped down as Tall Blacks coach and from his role at Melbourne United. Is there many other foreigners involved in basketball in Japan aside from the obvious imports?
There's a few, and Paulie and I have touched base, and he'll be coaching a team in the second division that's very serious about trying to get into the first division, so it's a good opportunity for him. There is a number of foreign coaches. I think the big thing that's happening in Japan over the last 3 years, and it's really on the up and up, has been how I ended up here, is by doing a coaches clinic after the Townsville situation, and every coach has to be licensed in the league here, and so everyone has to go through an education process, and there's been a marked improvement in the play of a lot of the local players. And the national program, I'm not sure if people of Australia understand that when Japan got the Olympics, the Japanese national team was told they wouldn't be in the Olympics, they weren't good enough, and they had to, their first step was to make the World Cup. And if they made the World Cup, that would guarantee them a spot in the Olympics, and they've revamped everything. They streamlined their national leagues. They had 2 different national leagues going on. Now it's only one with divisions. They revamped their whole national program. So the basketball education has been fantastic. And then every year they bring in foreign coaches to run these clinics, and so the level of play is lifting because the level of the coaching standard is lifting, and that's been fantastic. And there's also, you know, the 3 championships. The B League's only officially been going for 3 years, and the 3 championships have been won by foreign coaches. They had 2 foreign coaches. So the team I was with the first year I was here in Tochigi, who are now called Utsunomiya, and Albak Tokyo, who have a Serbian coach, who ironically was also with me at the very first B League coaches clinic. So we're both now head coaches in the league. So you know, there's a good sprinkling of foreign head coaches, which is bringing a different look to the league in both first division and second division and third division, and it's really helping improve the standard of the play and also the standard of coaching.
What about life for you as well? You're not quite living in the centre of Tokyo, so I imagine where you're living, it creates some challenges because they're probably not used to Westerners where you are, and I'm sure it has some language barriers which makes life difficult for you at the moment. What's life like for you and your wife Lani where you're living at the moment?
Well, we live in a place called Otsu, which is on Lake Biwa, which is the biggest lake in Japan. It's called the Mother Lake, and it's, you know, when you stand on the edge of it and look up the lake, it's like an ocean. It's huge. I think it's around about 1 kilometre deep in the middle, the deepest point. So it's a massive lake, and it's a 10-minute train ride outside of Kyoto, but you go through a tunnel. So there's a mountain range dividing Kyoto and Shiga, and basically when you leave Kyoto, which has a lot of foreigners and you know, quite a large city, and you know, Otsu itself is quite large. I think it's about 500,000 people. So you know, it's not small, and it's a different world. And you know, we can, you know, outside of, you know, obviously seeing, you know, our imports at practice, Lani and I you can go up to a month without seeing another foreign person, and so and where we live there's virtually zero English spoken by the locals. It's very, very, you rarely come across somebody who can speak any English. So you know, you learn to get by with different phrases, and you know, Lani's really mastering the language really well. So that's really helping us to be able to talk to people and live. I mean, the lifestyle itself is really good. And, you know, interestingly, in Australia, you know, living near the train station would be seen as a bad thing. But in Japan, if you can get a place near a train station, it's gold. And so we're lucky enough to live within about 5 minutes walk of 2 train stations, so we can jump on the train anytime we go to Kyoto, which is pretty cool, and get on the local line here and go to different places. Because one thing, you know, really good in Japan is the types of food that you can eat and the restaurants you can visit, and you know, it's that part of the lifestyle is really cool, and we love it a lot.
I guess because you get to go and work with a basketball team every day, you naturally probably fit in with the community a little bit easier. How's Lani found that transition where she probably felt, deservedly so, probably very alone to start with, but has she built a pretty good network herself?
It was really tough for Lani, and I remember Al Westover talking about it, you know, how tough it was for his wife. Al Westover actually coached this team about 5 or 6 years ago, I think, and I know his wife, it was very difficult, and it's very difficult on your wife because you can't just go out and, you know, it's difficult to meet people, and, you know, it's funny, and initially when you try, people in, you know, some people in Japan, you can be taken the wrong way as being perhaps a little racist, but because they can't speak English, and it's not like you can simply work it out between English and Japanese. They become very standoffish. You know, we've been turned away from restaurants because they just know they're not going to be able to communicate with us. So they literally just cross their arms, which means no, sorry. And initially you take offence to it, but then you realise that it's just because they know they can't talk to you. Yeah. And now that Lani can speak a little bit, we can go into different restaurants or different shops, and the moment she speaks, you can just feel the tension just disappear from the room, and they're amazingly polite and helpful, and you know, it's just awesome. So we're both getting better, and as Lani's been studying full-time Japanese, and she's really, you know, she teaches English as well, so she's starting to really settle in. And you know, it's interesting, we were just talking about last night, we just moved out of an apartment into a house here in Otsu, and it's really nice house for, you know, because a lot of the houses in Japan are quite small. This is a little bit more space, and you know, we're actually really settled here and really loving it. And so that part of it now, we're starting to find it, only because she can now go into shops even on her own, and she's getting more and more confident and comfortable. And the locals are really starting. Obviously now people are starting to know who I am, because as we said, as a foreigner in living in a small town, you stick out like a sore thumb. So people are starting to understand who we are and really welcoming, and it's become a fantastic lifestyle.
Yeah, it's an amazing culture. I spent, when I was younger, probably 2 months in Japan. I went with my dad, and because I was a little white kid with blonde hair, I like you said, you stand out a fair bit, and everyone was kind of fascinated just by what they were seeing, but they really just embrace you as well. And sometimes there's that natural culture barrier where it's difficult to communicate, but gee, once they are willing to open themselves up to you, it's an amazing country to be part of.
Sure is. It sure is.
Going into your third year now in Japan, do you see yourself being willing to stay there long term? Obviously 3 years is already, pretty long term, but could you see yourself, you never know what will happen in basketball, but could you see yourself staying there for a long time?
For sure. It's as you said, it's a comfortable lifestyle, and the basketball in Japan is really, really growing at a rapid rate. And particularly now with Rui Hachimura and Yuta Watanabe playing in the NBA. And there's another young player, Yudai Baba, who I would describe as a young Mitch Creek, plays downhill a lot, who's playing with the Dallas Mavericks junior team. So there's some really good young talent, and because now the NBA has got these two Japanese players in the NBA, and possibly a third, they're starting to put their links into Japan. Because 125 million people live in Japan, so there's a real market now coming for basketball in Japan, and being pushed by the NBA and the formation of the B League, and they've got really grandiose goals, and it's a good time to be here because of the growth, and it's great, and financially, for me as a head coach, it's been much better than I've ever been able to get in Australia. So there's that side of it as well. But do I miss the NBL? You betcha. I try and watch every game, and and I particularly watch the young players we had in Townsville now and how well they're doing in the NBL. And, you often sit back, and you shouldn't do it. But you sit back and think, well, what could have been if we'd been able to keep those kids all together? But, so, I miss that, and I miss, we miss home often. It's not like when I lived in New Zealand. You talk to everyone, and, there's a lot of similarities between Australia and New Zealand, although all my Kiwi mates will disagree with me. Living in Japan is different, so you do get homesick at times. But, we talked a lot about it, and we're getting more and more settled, and obviously we can converse with the locals a lot more, and we're finding it that we're really enjoying it a lot more. So, you never say never, but at this stage, I think it would take a lot for me to come home. And as you said, you never know in basketball either. As I say, every coach is just waiting to get fired. And so you can lose your job at any time in this business. But the goal is right now to probably stay here for a bit longer, but you're always open to discussions about anything.
But touch on that Townsville team, especially that last season where, as you know, I work closely with you as well, so I got to know a lot of the guys on that team, but Mitch Norton's about to play his 200th game in the league, and it's remarkable to think that back when you were coaching him, he was the youngest ever captain of the Crocs, and he celebrated that 100th game during that season, I think, when you were well and truly short-handed with that win in Melbourne. But if you have a look at the other members of that team, Nick Kay's gone on to be a superstar, and even at the World Cup, he was unbelievable. Clint Steinwell's now a championship winner and an experienced player in the league. Great to see Mirko Jerry back in the league this season with the Taipans. Harry Froling even's gone on to be knocking on the door to become an NBA player now, and even some of your imports. Jordan Jet recently as last year was back in the league. Brian Conklin was back in the league last season as well, and someone like Mitch Young only just retired as well. A lot of those guys on that team have gone on to great things, and you must be proud to see what a lot of them have been able to achieve.
Obviously, particularly the three in Perth. It's just phenomenal what they've achieved. And to watch the growth of Nordo as a leader, which we always knew he was going to be. To me, he's the heir apparent to probably take over the captaincy at Perth from Damo when Damo decides to step down. And he's doing a great job. And Nick Kay, I don't know. I guess I probably chased him the hardest when he was a rookie, because he just seemed to me to always be that guy that once he worked out what he needed to do to succeed, he was able to do it. And I the World Championship showed that. He had a slow start to the tournament, but by the end of it, he was. How anyone can criticise his selection is moronic to me, because he just got better and better and better because he's so smart. He's probably one of the smartest players I've ever coached. So he works things out very quickly and how he can, with his skill set, compete. And and that's why. There's talk of him now, could he play in the NBA? Well, yeah. I think he could play a role in the NBA because he's so smart and he'll work it out. He'll find a way to make it work. And Clint was always just a great shooter, and a guy that you just had to encourage that it's okay to keep shooting, son. And we really worked hard to give Clint. And again, he gets some unfounded criticism. Like, you kidding me? Every time he walks on the floor, you have to guard him. And that creates space. And guys like Bryce Cotton and all that get a lot of the kudos for how good Perth are, but guys like Clint Stein will create that space for those guys to play one-on-one rather than have to play one-on-two all the time. And then, and the player that we verbally agreed to was Mitch McCarron, and, he's gone on to bigger and better things as well. So, you look at all those, and you just think it could have been, well, it would have been special. That obviously our biggest challenge would have been, keeping that team together, because, it's no secret that Perth, when Perth decided they wanted Nick Kay and Mitch Norton, they made sure they were able to get them. Yep. And that would have been our biggest challenge, is trying to keep that thing together. But it would have been a nice challenge to have.
Your coaching journey is remarkable, and it was on the back of almost a 200-game playing career in the NBL as well. But I imagine until you got to Perth, it was probably difficult to make a living out of coaching as much as you were basically working full-time. Has the last 10 years made some of that hard work in the first 15 or 16 years, has that paid off a little bit for you because you put in a lot of the hard yards where you now can't, like you said, you are now making the best living that you ever have from basketball?
Yeah, very few people are lucky just to walk straight into coaching. Yeah. It's literally, I go back to, I was lucky initially. I entered the coaching ranks under Tom Wisman while I was still playing in Newcastle. And then I became his full-time assistant. And then I took over as head coach of Newcastle. And, at the time, everyone thinks you're ready. And I look back on that and go, that was probably the biggest mistake I made in my coaching career. I was not ready to be a head coach. And it really woke me up about what I needed to do. And, I don't know if people know, but I would go to, NITP camps and sleep on the floor, things like that. I just... I read an article about Nick Nurse saying he just did everything he could to try and become a better coach, and that was what I did. And literally in New Zealand, when I was coaching New Zealand, I was pulling beers in the off season to make ends meet. And it's what you've got to do. You've got to do the hard yards, and I think that's where some ex-players think, I just become an assistant coach, and they find out how hard and how much work there is to it, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to go through that again. They did that as a player, and now they're going to have to do it as an assistant coach. And but you've got to do it, and if you can hang in there, to me the rewards are not about financial. The rewards is what we just spoke about. When you look back at the people that you've crossed and the contacts and friends you've made that are lifelong, and when former players ring you and tell you some exciting news or things like that, they're what really drives you. And when you watch young kids go on, and succeed, and the people you touch along the journey is what really drives you and keeps you going. And now you end up in a situation like this. You feel very blessed and lucky, but like with all coaching jobs, it's also extremely volatile, and you don't know how long you're going to have it. So the joy of it is just focusing in on the relationship aspects and trying to help young men develop, not just on the court but off the court, and watching them grow as humans and as basketball players.
Just finally, sorry to have kept you so long already, but looking back 10 years, was the move to Perth the best decision that you ever made, not only in a basketball sense to reconnect with Bevo and join up with the Wildcats, but I don't think you would have met Lani if you didn't make that move?
No, I wouldn't have. By far was the best coaching decision I ever made. I had two choices. It's funny, how that all worked out. I was coaching Hawks Bay in New Zealand. I'd been there for 7 years, and I sort of felt I'd achieved everything from a personal point of view at Hawks Bay, and I probably could have stayed there. It was virtually a lifelong job. We had a really good program running, and interesting, recommended Paul Hanari take over that job. And Paulie and I were talking about it just not long ago when he was in Japan with the Tall Blacks. I went up and caught up with him, and that we got him into coaching. He took over for me. And I made a decision to leave New Zealand. I was thinking, you know what, I'm going to have to go back and sacrifice and try and get back into the NBL because I'm not going anywhere here. And I moved to New Zealand to prove that I could coach a program and win, and I was able to do that. And within about 2 or 3 weeks of stepping down from the New Zealand job and making that decision, I had an offer to go back home to Victorian country and coach the NIT Pike program. And then Bevo rang me and said, Mark Radford's going to Adelaide. You know, I want you to come over and meet with Nick. And, you know, I met with Nick and when I was a player, it was always a dream to be part of the Wildcats program, you know, and then when you're a coach, you look at the Perth Wildcats program from the outside and it's just amazing. And so to have that opportunity, and I always wanted to, you know, I love coaching development, but it was always a dream to get back to the NBL. And when I got that opportunity to go to Perth, it was a no-brainer. It was the easiest decision of my life, you know, to make. And yeah, it really transformed it really accelerated the situations I was in terms of coaching and allowed me to move forward and get other opportunities. And that's what working for an organisation like Perth does. And, you know, I'm forever grateful for my time there. Obviously forever grateful, and the friendship with Bevo's phenomenal. And, but also forever grateful to Nick Marvin. And, some people don't like him, but I found Nick great to work for. He was a hard taskmaster, you know, and he really helped me in a lot of areas of growth in a personal way, and that's something I'll be forever grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the way I first connected with you as well, and I'm glad that we've been able to keep our connection going for this long because, like I said at the start, you're just one of the most genuine people that you can ever come across. I've always had a great time talking to you wherever we've managed to catch up, and you've always been a great supporter of mine as well. You've done a lot to help me over the years, so I always appreciate that, and I'll always do whatever I can to help you in return if you ever need anything. And thanks very much for joining us, and we'll make sure you reconnect with Shawn at some stage as well. But Shawn, thanks very much for joining us.
Mate, always a pleasure. You know, I love talking about the game, and you know, I think, you know, as I said, a lot of people see me as this angry guy on the sidelines, but as Lani knows, away from it, you know, my favourite thing to do is to jump in the van and head bush and disappear. So I'm the most laid back guy away from the game you've ever seen. But yeah, when I enter the rectangle, I become a different person. But thanks for having me on, and you know, thank you to Shawn, and you know, it's just great to see what's happening with the NBL in Australia, and great to watch from afar.
This interview is proudly brought to you by ID Athletic, West Australian-owned company providing all of the sports that you can ask for with their uniform needs, whether it's on field, whether it's your polo shirts, your jackets off the field. ID Athletic will have you covered, whether it's basketball, and they're well versed in that, whether it's SBL, local clubs, social clubs, BWA clubs, whatever you are, wobble clubs. Basketball gear is their specialty, but also, as some of the footy codes now prepare to start their pre-season, check out idathletic.com and you can find some special deals for your footy pre-season gear, all your training shorts and singlets and everything in between. Just mention Basketball Hustle when you get in touch with the team at ID Athletic. Always a terrific turnaround in terms of customer service, a 4-week delivery which will have you well and truly satisfied. So check out idathletic.com and support one of our great sponsors here on Basketball Hustle. Big thank you to Shawn Dennis for taking so much time out of his hectic schedule in Japan coaching right now to have a chat to us here on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. And now, Shawn, fourth quarter segment, you were able to catch up with Mitch Creek before the game last Friday in Perth. He's got a fascinating journey to talk about. Spent time, obviously, in the past 12 months with a couple of stints in the NBA at the Timberwolves and the Brooklyn Nets. Played some terrific G League basketball at the Long Island Nets, playing for Will Weaver, the now Kings coach. And obviously before that, he played 197 games at the Adelaide 36ers and had a terrific career there. But since coming back, played for the Boomers at the World Cup, and now is a key part of everything that the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix are doing. And you were able to catch up with him to chat basketball and a couple of other things which might catch some of our listeners by surprise.
So, hot start to the season for yourself and the Phoenix. What's been the key for you guys so far?
I think it's just the camaraderie and the mateship we've developed already. Everyone got in extra early. We had guys come in probably a month or 6 weeks even earlier than expected, than your traditional pre-season. But it was easy. We didn't have any hangovers from previous years of, this is what our standard is, this is what to expect. We had some of the most, genuine leaders in the competition, Ben Madgen, myself, Ty Wesley, Adam Gibson. You have these guys come in and set the record straight. This is how we're going to play. This is the mentality we're taking in. This is the expectation. And from there, it's been really easy because everyone's kind of followed along. We've all helped each other and we've all helped build what the culture is today.
Yeah, last season you spent a bit of time in the NBA. How did you find that experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, an absolute wealth of experience for me. Confidence just to even be out on the court with some of those guys. To be around some of the greatest basketball players and, even better than that, some of the greatest basketball minds and coaches and development guys in the league and in the world ever. Those moments are priceless. So you try and absorb as much information as possible, and you try and carry it over to help your teammates and yourself every single day. So for me, whether I played 2 minutes a game or whatever it was I averaged over there, it's just the things you see and you hear that really help you.
And was there anything that surprised you about NBA life and then the game over there that you learned when your time over there?
Yeah, there's not much rest if you're a guy that's coming at the end of the bench or you're not playing a whole bunch of minutes. It is really cutthroat. It is obviously really competitive. You have to sacrifice your body and your rest, and some of the big players get to go and sleep in and roll out before the game and go through their routine. But as a guy coming to the very end of a bench or maybe not even playing, you've got to be up at 9 a.m. working out the injured guys, and you've got to do your own individuals, then you go into the game and you're travelling, and then you play, and then you get on a plane, and everyone goes home and goes to sleep, and you're back in the next morning at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning doing the exact same thing. So it's a very taxing, grueling, cutthroat league, but at the same time, if you do break in, what you get from that is, dreams come true.
And who had the most impressive car that showed up at training?
I don't know. I think Damari Crowell had a Hellcat that was absolutely pimping. Some of the boys had some nice ones. I know Cater Beats Diop went out and bought himself a brand new Porsche right as I was leaving. So he got that new paycheck and went out and spent half by the looks of it.
So it's safe to say you didn't have the nicest car on the team at that stage?
No, I had a brand new donated Jeep given to me by the team. I didn't have to pay for it.
Who approached you the most NBA-wise as a player out there on the court?
Oh, mate, there were so many. I mean, you look at the likes of Giannis, who like an MVP last year. I got to guard him for probably 15, 20 minutes, and that was just an experience that you get to enjoy and you get to really grasp onto and really go after. Like, I enjoyed every second of it. The charms running down, and you're just thinking, like, what is his weakest point? Like, how can I make him the least effective player as possible? And that's what you're thinking. Then after the game, you're watching the highlights, and you've got family going crazy. Going, oh my God, you got it in, blah, blah, blah. And you don't think of it like that, but he's probably for me the number one guy. Him or probably Westbrook. He's just ferociousness and tenacity of how he attacks the game was second to none.
Awesome experience. And there's a rumor out there that you might be training a magpie. Is this true?
Yeah, Swoops has become part of the culture. The boys seem to like him, and they came around for a barbecue the other day. I put on a bit of a spread, and they were pretty shocked. Even John Robertson tried to hand feed the magpie as well. So Swoops is very much a part of the Creek family now.
Well, I might have to hire you in the off-season. There's a magpie that attacks my son every time he gets on a bike on our street. So, Mitch Creek, thanks for your time. Good luck in the game today. Fun to see your development, and I'm sure you'll be back in the NBA soon.
No, thanks.
Big thank you to Devlin's for bringing us this week's fourth quarter segment. Check them out at 411 Hay Street, Subiaco, but even more importantly, devlinsonline.com.au. Simon Devlin, a fantastic supporter of basketball here in Perth, but a fantastic supporter of Basketball Hustle now as well. And he's had a store that's been in business for over 20 years, has a huge range of men's products, everything from glasses to pens to cufflinks to luggage, and of course his world famous cigars, and even more famous is the customer service that he provides at Devlin's in Subiaco or devlinsonline.com.au. Make sure you support the sponsors that are supporting us. Thanks very much there to Mitch Creek for catching up with you, Shawn, for the fourth quarter segment. Terrific for him to give up his time. And also to old Swoopsy there, his magpie. Sounds like he's becoming a bit of a hit there in Melbourne since he's come back.
Well, I'm not sure if you could hear it there, but when he started talking about Swoops, the rest of his teammates were shooting around before the game. They all stopped and were listening to what Mitch Creek and had big smiles. So it sounds like he's a big hit with that club, and maybe he can be the one that spurs them into reaching the finals in the inaugural season for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. So it was great to catch up with Mitch.
Absolutely, and great for him to do it pre-game as well. So thanks a lot to Mitch for that. I hope you enjoyed the fourth quarter. Thanks to Devlins. Check out devlinsonline.com. And now we move straight into a preview for round 5, Sean. We've got plenty of matches to look forward to. All gets underway Thursday, back in Auckland, Spark Arena. New Zealand Breakers, they need a win. They're 1-3. Cairns Taipans, they're in some pretty good form. They've won 2 of their last 3, and this is their last road game for almost a month. So they'll be looking to return home with some good momentum.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Both teams are, desperate for a win. I think New Zealand Breakers, to me, it seems like they're starting to kind of figure things out, and I expect them to get a win, as we saw against Illawarra last week. There at Spark Arena. It seems like Thursday night is going to be an entertaining night there in Spark Arena, and I expect the 7,000 strong that they got potentially last week. Hopefully they get that this week to get them over the line.
Friday night, just the one game on Friday night this round. Brisbane Bullets, let's hope they get a better crowd as well. I think it's Nissan Arena now. They've got a naming rights sponsor at the Netball Centre there in Brisbane. Play the Perth Wildcats who are coming off a pretty impressive doubleheader weekend. It's a tough one for the Bullets, who need to find some form.
Yeah, they do. And, the Perth Wildcats got a stretch of 4 games away as well now, too. So this is important for them. They don't play again back in Perth until the 17th of November. So they're going to want to try and get some wins. We know they had some struggles in the middle of the season last year. So, but important, I think, for Perth just to get that confidence they can get some wins on the road. In Brisbane, this is they need to be able to turn around their form and get some cohesion out there on the court and figure out if their imports are the right ones as well for them.
Then on Saturday, got the second throwdown. As you said, Southeast Melbourne, they've got a terrific run in their first 10 games of playing, 9 of them at Melbourne Arena. They get to take on Melbourne United. Gee, this is a big game for United, especially if they lose this and slip to 1-5, and they've lost twice already to the Phoenix. That's a horrible way to start the season, and as we'll see, they then have another game later this round against the Kings too.
Yeah, it's interesting that they've played already twice in the first five rounds. Starting a bit of a rivalry there. I think Melbourne will get this one. I think that they're going to be pretty desperate, not having to travel. I just think that they would have learned a little bit from that first game against Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, probably make some adjustments how they're going to guard Roberson and Creek. And, I expect Melbourne United to figure out and come up with their second win of the year.
Second game on Saturday, I imagine the biggest crowd at Adelaide Entertainment Centre that we've seen over their first 3 home games at their new venue when the 36ers host the Sydney Kings. Obviously, Jerome Randall up against his former team once again, as we saw in round 1. Let's hope that Deshon Taylor plays as well for the Kings, because that adds another level of intrigue to the contest. But this one's tough to tip because the Sixers have been pretty good at home so far.
Yeah, and you just think Sydney's had a really good start. Sometimes you feel a little bit overconfident going in. Adelaide's a tough place. I've never played at their new arena, but I imagine it's even tougher than the older one, and especially a big crowd with Bogut coming in, Casper Ware coming back to play in Adelaide. I think it should attract a big crowd. So I think Adelaide will get this one and hand Sydney their first loss of the year.
Another big game on Sunday as well. Not quite in Auckland either. So the Wildcats have got some extra travelling to do to take on the New Zealand Breakers. Both teams coming off having played earlier in the round as well, with the Breakers having a bit of travel to do from Auckland to head a bit further. I think it's south, and then hosting the Wildcats. Always a terrific rivalry, and it'll be fascinating to see their first battle of the season against one another.
I think Perth will get the one against Brisbane on Friday, but I think New Zealand's going to get this one on Sunday. And knowing that this game is not just in Auckland, they've got to go down to Invercargill and play down south there as well. So play Friday, travel all day Saturday, and then play Sunday in New Zealand, and the time zone
pretty
difference there as well. It's there's a lot of factors, and as well as Perth is playing, and they do have Bryce Cotton, but it is tough to play over New Zealand and be in that time zone difference. So I think New Zealand Breakers, and they're still desperate to get back into that top 4. So I think New Zealand will get that one. Yeah,
all of a sudden, like you said, if they can get these 2 wins, they're back to 2 and 3, and I think you would take that start if you were the Breakers, given you had the trip to America to start things off with as well in between.
Yeah, new coach, a lot of new players. Yep. Obviously, a young point guard, talented point guard in RJ Hampton. So there's a lot of things that they've kind of had to figure out on the fly. But yeah, if they can start 3-3, I think that's not keep them in contention. That's not a bad result to start the season.
And you've tipped against the Wildcats again. They might not let you back into RAC Arena for that November 17th game, Shawn.
Well, from my understanding, Pike, has any team gone undefeated in the NBL? No. So they're going to lose some. I know this is just, we're talking about professional players here. There's not a whole lot of difference in there. And it's just tough to be on your game every night in and night out. And I just put on my own personal travel with the NBL. Some games are just harder to win than others. And no matter how hard you try and get yourself ready, the other team being at home, rested, it's a tough ask.
Yeah, but being rational, I'm not sure if that goes hand in hand with the Red Army all the time, Shawn. So you'll have to take what you can get with them. Also on Sunday, Illawarra Hawks, Brisbane Bullets in Canberra. So probably not much of a home court advantage for the Hawks, but massive game for both teams. They both need to win this.
Yeah, it is. And, Illawarra having to travel to Canberra. I played a couple games in Canberra. The atmosphere wasn't fantastic. So I'll be interested to see what kind of crowd support they do get there. But I actually think Brisbane will get this just because of the losses that Illawarra has and the injury concerns there could make it tough. Although I guess the kicker there is Brisbane's playing their second game of the round as well. So Illawarra might be fresh, but I just think, losing Josh Boone, Aaron Brooks is going to make it tough.
Jesse Wagstaff won't like you talking down Canberra too much.
Well, I think there's a reason Jesse Wagstaff is living over here in Perth now, right?
Possibly. Last game of the round, Monday, massive game. Melbourne Cup Eve in Melbourne. Melbourne United playing Sydney Kings. Casper Ware's first reappearance back in Melbourne against United. Obviously, he led to a championship 2 years ago and to the grand final last year. A lot to look forward to about this game. A chance for Melbourne United to make a statement that they're back in the mix, but a chance for the Sydney Kings to really make another statement too and make life really tough for Melbourne.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, an intriguing one. It's a tough weekend for Sydney. Great start for them, but this is going to really test them. Can they go on the road to Adelaide and Melbourne and get wins? I'm really excited for this matchup on Monday because I feel like these are probably two most talented teams in the competition. You might have the Wildcat fans getting upset at me, but if you look at it from just a pure talent point of view, I think these two teams are the best out there. And so I'm intrigued to see how this one plays out. I'm going to tip Melbourne here, being at home. And I'll be interested to see the reception that Casper Ware receives when he gets announced there at Melbourne Arena.
Similar to the Breakers, if Melbourne is able to get both these games like you've tipped, suddenly to be 3-4, given the way they've started and they still haven't seen Casey Prather, I reckon you would take that if you were Dean Vickerman.
Well, I don't think it's, for the talent that team has, starting 3-4 is probably not the best that many would have predicted. But considering you're 1-4, if you can get these two wins against two good quality oppositions, Sydney's sitting top, Southeast Melbourne's sitting third. So it's a good test for Melbourne, and the fact that they get to play both games in Melbourne should be beneficial to them. And we'll see, if they do lose both, then what happens? You could be potentially 1-6. Has there ever been a 1-6 team go on to make the finals? We'll have to maybe ask the question to Statman this week and see if that's ever been done.
Well, we'll find out because this is a massive weekend to look forward to, Shawn. And this was a massive episode. Thanks a lot for your insight into everything happening in the NBL at the moment. Thank you for catching up with Mitch Creek as well. Thanks to Mitch Norton ahead of his 200th NBL game for having a chat to us. And thanks to Sean Dennis, NBL Coach of the Year, 200-game NBL player, coaching in Japan right now. He's put a lot into basketball over the last 30-plus years. So it was fantastic to catch up with him as well. Thanks always to Hoop 7 for making this possible. Also to ID Athletic and to Devlins for helping us along this ride. We've got through 5 shows now, Shawn. Let's hope everybody enjoyed tuning in. What can you leave our listeners with?
Well, I think you make a good point. if you enjoy the show, support our sponsor, Hoops Heaven ID Athletic Devlins. They're getting right behind us and allowing us to bring this show to you. If you got any questions, also, post those to us on our social media accounts. We'd love to answer those. Might even have a little question and answer episode down the track and answer some of the questions that our fans have. Or if there's someone particular that you want us to interview, let us know. We're enjoying this and want to bring you guys the best show we can possible. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, have a great time.